Hi Chris, how are you?
Good afternoon, Rod. Yes, I'm well. Here we are. Beautiful sunshine here, and I think it's sunny with you.
I think it's sunny everywhere in the UK, frankly. It's an amazing day out there.
It is beautiful. Can be cold in the shade, but on the whole, it's beautiful. So I've been very much enjoying the sun today. Bit of table tennis.
Oh, very nice. I took the dog to the beach. She had a lovely time chasing the ball in and out the water. It was idyllic.
Idyllic.
Yeah.
Idyllic. We like idyllic. That sounds good.
Not a word I get to use very much.
That's the joy of being in the UK, I think, or anywhere in the world at the moment, potentially.
Well, I think in some places it's less joyful, that's for sure.
That is true. So it's episode 167, and it's the 5th of April, and it's 2025.
It is, and I can't believe we're, as far into the year as we are.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? We're in April, and we're going to blaze through April at an alarming rate, I think.
Yeah, although at least we'll start getting some news that isn't depressing. Hopefully we'll get some fun stuff to talk about rather than just the usual grind of tariffs and everything that's going mad in the world at the moment.
I think we've got the fun stuff coming under the game section today. I'm pretty confident.
We can spend all of our time in games. Should we dive straight into follow-up?
But let's dive into follow-up and see if we can get through the show without coughing and sneezing.
Seems unlikely. So first story in follow-up, the iOS 18.4 updates and 15.4 and whatever version of the operating system you're on, watchOS, tvOS, all the OSs were updated. You updated all your devices?
Yeah, I've done mine. I've done my family's as a good IT person in the house. Just make sure my wife's laptop's up together. Just got the kids to do it on their phones. But there's not really a lot in here, is there? Like the iOS 18 train was going to be exciting, and has got less exciting because they can't do any of the AI stuff and they haven't really got anything else for us.
So I haven't updated all the devices because I got asked the question, if I update my phone, will our new Volvo car key stop working? And I said, I can't answer that. So one phone hasn't been updated. I mean, it shouldn't make any difference whatsoever, but you don't know how flaky Volvo software is.
I think that once you've set up the car key, it's nothing to do with Volvo at that point, I think. But I could be wrong. I've had the car keys for years. I've updated every iOS and beta version. I had no problems. That's my experience, but your experience may differ or vary.
Your mileage may vary, as they say. Yeah, it'll update when it updates, and we'll talk about why that might be less of an issue as we sort of flip through the follow-up here. So yeah, updates out across the operating systems. The Mac across from me, I haven't updated either. It'll come in the fullness of time, but my devices are all up to date. And I got to say, other than a couple of bugs that I experienced, I think it's just meh, isn't it? Yeah,
there's nothing really in it. For me, in my car, I get one extra one column of icons extra on the car in my BMW, and that's it. That's the only thing I've noticed.
Yeah, I haven't noticed very much, I got to say. Even the thing is, I don't even use Apple Mail, so like as a Mac user, one of the major things we got from 15.4 is the organized the inbox organization that the iOS has
and it's rubbish, and people don't understand it. And do you know what? I've actually turned that off for a lot of people who've shown me their phone and gone, I can't find my email. Where's it gone? And I'm like, just tap the dots, list view, job done. And a lot of people don't like that view, and I think they've made it easier to switch back now.
Yeah, well, it seems like this is the story of iOS 18, really. You think people didn't like photos, they want to get back to how that was. They don't like mail, they want to get back how that was. I don't like Apple Intelligence, I've switched that off. So this has not been the most successful version of the software, I don't think.
I would probably turn off Apple Intelligence if I could keep the animation.
I don't think having a swanky blue animation is worth it, frankly. The old Siri animation, let's face it, Siri is thick. It's the Emperor's New Clothes is what this is. You're just dressing it up in a different thing to get the same result.
But I like it. It makes me smile when I see it.
It's meh. I used to like it. I don't miss it having switched it off. Seriously, give yourself a chance and switch it off and see if you really miss it.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe I should do that. Okay, I might take a look. I think I have turned it off on my Mac. It's just on my phone. I like it and in CarPlay.
I don't have Siri enabled in any way on my Mac.
Why would you?
Why would you?
It's quicker to do it without.
Yeah, I don't think you'll miss it, the animation, particularly if you switch it off, so we'll see how that goes. Should we talk about a couple of things that the updates brought pain points for people?
Which I must confess I've not had any pain, so I'm just going to put that out there. But yeah, let's go through the pain points.
So this I did see immediately. I don't have automatic updates turned on my phone or on my Mac. I like to be in control of that, mostly because I'm all over it. And the second an update drops, pretty much I know to go and get it, and I can install it in my own time. This switched on for me on my phone and my Mac. I had automatic updates automatically turn on me, and I don't agree. I don't like it.
I was just real-time follow-up. I was just turning off Apple Intelligence, so I've done it, and I will try it all out. I have mine all turned on, but I'm normally on it quicker than it kicks in. So what do I think about? I think in some ways this is good because often I touch families' phones and they're not set to auto update, or they don't seem to be getting the updates. But I kind of agree it shouldn't change something without you wanting it.
It's fine. I think if it came out the box with it switched on, or whenever I originally installed my iPhone, I've lost track now over the last time I did a fresh update, and I said, no, I want this on, or I left it on, fine, I'd have no issue with it. But it should respect the settings that you've already got set, no matter what the setting is.
Agreed. I would definitely agree with that. It should respect the settings. That is 100% the right thing to do.
And on my Mac, it also turned back on Apple Intelligence, which I really didn't like.
It should maybe prompt you and go, we noticed you haven't got your phone set to auto update. We think you should do it. That I could get behind, but automatically changing it, I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, I don't think you should do this to anybody. People who have gone into the settings to switch things off generally have a reason for it, as with Apple Intelligence, as with this. So it's a bit presumptive of Apple to do it.
Agreed.
Another feature of 18.4 that's come along, this one less painful, is apparently, why isn't that loading, is apparently that there'll be more RCS enabled carriers and more RCS features within 18.4. This seems to be the case. My wife got a text from her brother who was skiing in France and got a notification on her phone that this was an RCS message that she'd got. So fair enough, he's an iPhone user as well, obviously in a foreign carrier at that point. RCS just works, baby.
It's good, and it's going out to more carriers. I don't know what this means for UK carriers, but I assume some of the smaller ones are now getting mopped up with all of this, so it's got to be good, isn't it?
Well, she's on giffgaff, my wife, so that's a smaller carrier, so I think it's great that obviously giffgaff, I don't get that with Smarty via 3, but giffgaff is obviously supporting RCS now, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm on EE, they support RCS, fairly confident O2 do, so it feels like it's getting there. I'm
thinking about this now. Presumably at that point he didn't have data switched on as he was travelling, because otherwise it should have just come in as an iMessage. So maybe this is a carrier-based thing. As soon as you drop back down to just making use of whatever the lowest level is when he's out there, and you get it as an RCS message rather than SMS. Yeah, I would agree with that. It makes sense. If you're iPhone to iPhone, you go iMessage. If you can't do that, it's RCS to RCS, and if you can't do that, it'll be text message. Yeah, I mean, I guess some people don't want iMessage and they switch it off. I know a couple of people that definitely don't want it. So. At least you've got the options. Maybe Apple would automatically turn it on for you at the moment based on what we've just been talking about, though. The other feature we've got from 18.4 that's been brought in, other than you getting another row of icons, and I haven't had a chance to test this yet on the Volvo because I haven't had to drive all week, is that iPhone CarPlay connectivity is breaking for some users. So this is a report in 9to5Mac from earlier in the week. That iPhone users are experiencing a wide range of bugs in CarPlay. Multiple users saying now Play information CarPlay no longer shows on their car's gear cluster display. Did you have any of these issues? No, I've driven 3 cars, I think, and they've all been fine. So a Skoda, a BMW, and a Porsche, and no issues to report other than, like I say, get an extra row of icons on my BMW. Extra column, sorry. I'm trying to decide if that's some sort of humble brag there, Chris, but I might let you off. I don't think it's a humble brag, is it? The BMW is going this week, though, so you can pour one out for the electric Beamer, which I did love that car, and I still love that car, but it's not my car, so it's going to get a clean later. It's first clean, and then it will go back. No longer an EV user, oh dear. I shall return at some point, I'm sure, because I do think if I have a job where I'm commuting, an EV is the right car for me because I love just charging it when I come home. I don't even think about it. So I will get another EV if I have the job that necessitates. I read a thing from Car Magazine this morning in Apple News, of all places. I happened to be in there because it got pushed as a notification and it caught my eye. That I think your BMW, or at least the i4, is the 3rd best EV to buy secondhand because of the depreciation drop that they've had and the quality. It did go through my head, should I offer to buy it off the company, because it's approximately half the value of what it was when it was bought brand new, and that's 3 years old. Yeah, bit of a depreciation problem. Moving on, we're talking about Microsoft a little bit more later on, and I apologise to YouTube viewer users. I have no idea why Safari is failing to load a tab when I drag it in between my windows here, but there we are. Microsoft, we talked about something like this in the past, I'm sure. This is a thin client box for Windows devices. This is called the 365 Link, a little black box that sits and connects to local monitors to give you access to cloudy things, so remote desktop connections, Azure cloud things, stuff like that. And you think that's fine. What would a device like that cost me? 50, 60 quid? No, it's £349 for this, and I think that is absolutely stunningly expensive for not an awful lot of kit.
What does this do, though? Because this is the cost of an iPad, like a regular iPad. And you can get those for about $309, say. So it's even more expensive. And that's got a screen on it, a reasonable screen. It's not fantastic, but it's not awful. It's got microphones, it's got cameras, multiple cameras. How is a black box more expensive than that when all it's got is USB and HDMI and Ethernet and Wi-Fi? It just blows my mind.
It makes absolutely no sense to me at all, this. That you can't do anything on locally. There's been lots of thin clients. I deployed them to operating theatres back in the day. I think they cost 74 quid, and they were completely sealed units that you could wipe clean with chlorhexidine and things like that, other than the ports on them. So, very robust little devices. In that scenario, inside an operating theatre, you wanted them to be unburstable. They were very cheap, they were wipeable and all the rest of it. And you could actually, if you really wanted to, run a very, very minimal Linux install on them if you did want something local. This doesn't even give you that ability and doesn't have the ability to wipe clean. In the Register article, they say you can pick up a Dell thin client for less, £287, so that's a reasonable saving. And I'm just going to put in here.
It does make the Mac Mini look incredibly cheap, though, doesn't it? The Mac Mini is £600. It's a couple hundred quid more than this, and you get a whole computer, which is pretty well spec'd.
Or go to Amazon or something similar, and for 189 quid, you can have an Intel small computing device with twin HDMI outputs and an Ethernet for 1 gig and all the rest of it, built-in sound card, and that's a full computer. This genuinely baffles me as to why you would buy this Microsoft thin client.
Unless it's super easy to manage and maintain, maybe for enterprises. It seems bonkers, though. It's just too much money. But you can see companies buying these, and this is your only way of working, and you must be in the office to use it. You can see us going back 5 years and dragging people in the office.
It's just somebody who has drunk all of the Microsoft Kool-Aid. That's all I can see about this.
I think the idea is good. It's just completely the wrong price point.
It is. A company that will never get Apple's price points at any sort of cost is Epic. Epic have a long-going fight with Apple about this. And the CEO of Epic, Tim Sweeney, has called Apple a gangster company because of the way it sort of invades markets and the way it behaves, sort of very mobster-like behavior. There is long-standing beef between Epic and Apple, going back to when they dropped the developer accounts, and actually, but starting before that, when they tried to introduce their V-Bucks currency inside of Fortnite, not subject to Apple's in-app payment rules. So we know there's bad blood there. I don't particularly like either company in this scenario, but I find it hard to argue with them, given all the stuff we've talked about with Apple recently, that Apple isn't behaving like as a mobster. Shame if something happened to your nice little software company there, isn't it?
Yeah, basically Epic CEO is saying that Apple and Google are gangster companies in that they're seeing what they can get away with until they get caught, and I think that's quite an interesting look of it. I don't like any of these companies, like from this angle, by the way, but I don't disagree with this statement. I think he's right. They are all trying to get away with stuff until regulation forces them otherwise, and we've spoken about it for months, if not years, at this point. At
length, and I don't think if Epic were in the same position, it would do anything different. Really, if it had the dominant market share, I think capitalism's got a capitalist. But as somebody pushing against the bounds of the app stores, Google's and Apple's, it's hard to argue with them.
I completely agree, and shareholders want their returns and their revenue, don't they? So this is always going to win.
Yeah, although we're seeing capitalism break in real time at the moment, I think. So we shall see.
I think it's broken.
Yeah, I mean, maybe another day it'd be interesting to go through sort of the generations of economic theory that are being pushed out here. Apparently, and I didn't know a lot about this either, the previous economic model we were living in was the neoliberal one, brought about by Reagan and Thatcher in 1977. And this is the first time we've had a change in that since 1977. And that model, prior to neoliberalism, came about from 1946, just after the Second World War. So this is only the third iteration of capitalism we're about to sort of go through, as pushed forward by an American agenda. So interesting.
Yeah, and obviously far more about it than I do by the sounds of it. So it's quite interesting.
I work at a university. I learn things by osmosis.
Fair play.
Speaking of working at a university, 75% of US scientists who answered Nature's poll, Nature being a big journal that publishes very high impact science, are considering leaving the United States to go to Canada and to other places. And frankly, that's got to be horrifying for a country that's been as scientifically progressive as the United States. Let's face it, the computers that we use, a lot of the science that we have, and all the rest of it, we have them thanks to lots of technology and scientists, and that has been born by the USA and shared by the USA and published in journals like Nature and all the rest of it. And the brain drain is very real. If you think we're only in, day 77 of the Trump presidency?
Yeah, it feels like he's been president for years at this point. And obviously it's his second term, but there was a gap in the middle, but it doesn't feel like it.
No. I'd be very concerned about this, that 75% of scientists wanting to leave your country, that's horrendous.
It's not good, is it? And you need this for the future. Like, I don't know, it feels very here and now with everything they're doing on the markets and what have you, but you need to think longer. You want your president to be thinking longer term.
I mean, it's interesting if you think you've got companies like Tesla, which need literal rocket scientists, and Tesla, who need chemists and physicists and all the rest of it to get the most out of their batteries. You need software engineers. You need the people to have written the papers, to publish that in order for you to build that amazing engineering that all this is based on. And if you get rid of that top level, then very, very quickly afterwards, the people below that are going to go away. Particularly if they've gone to other countries. So that economic might and scientific might and engineering might the United States has had for such a long period of time really is in danger at this point. It's all very well bringing back basic manufacturing jobs and drilling oil wells and all the rest of it, but you're losing the top of that actually can maximize the production that your country is pushing out.
Unless they're expecting companies to do all their own funding and it all then becomes even private. And look, I'm probably speaking out of turn. This is not a world I know a huge amount about, but it feels like that's where they're going, that the government aren't going to fund this anymore.
Well, definitely. They're not going to fund health services. They're not going to fund science. They're not going to fund universities. What are they going to fund? Billionaires.
Trump's third term.
I think before we say too much, let's move on. Should we do some news?
Yeah, let's move on. Do some news.
Do you want to tell us about Gmail's end-to-end encryption?
So I did read this article. This was quite interesting. So Gmail can do end-to-end encryption, but it sounds, as a user, you think, oh, great, I just turn that on and off we go. Not quite. You need your own certificate server. So it's more aimed at small organizations. So if I were to send you an encrypted email, I need it turned on. My organization would need this encryption server that when I then email you, I'll send you a copy of the key. You then need to authenticate against my network, in essence, or my company, so that you can then read my email. But once you've authenticated once, you can save that, obviously, and you don't need to set up an account again. So it does make sense. I've seen this before with Microsoft. So it's good in one way, but obviously how many companies are going to want to set up accounts with every company they deal with? It doesn't feel like a great way of working, but it does kind of make sense what they're doing. And I guess if you are working maybe with a legal company and they're handling all your legal stuff and you're using Google as your email client, as your email platform, that you'd have that agreement with them. We're going to email you and it's going to be encrypted, but you need to set up an account with us to receive and read the email, even though it's crossing domains, if that makes sense. So you're going from company A's domain to company B's domain. You at company B would need an account with company A.
I mean, this is just how PGP and end-to-end encryption works, really.
Yep. There's not much you can do about it.
No. It's good that they offer the feature. There are obviously providers like ProtonMail and others that do this in a slightly more seamless way, where they do have more built-in end-to-end encryption. And of course, it doesn't really matter anymore. Even if you're planning attacks on other nations, you can just use an end-to-end encrypted thing like Signal, as long as you know everybody that's in the chat. So.
And don't add a journalist by mistake.
Well, yeah, the journalist probably forced his way in there, Chris. Come on. I think your OPSEC is probably only as good as the people that are making use of it. It's all very well having end-to-end encrypted email services, but you CC in one person who's not part of that chain, and out your email goes. So all of these things need to be considered, really. You and I think, are very positive on higher security, end-to-end encryption, doing all the right things that you can to preserve your privacy for whatever reason. And I think this is good that Google offer the option, but as you say, it's probably not for everybody.
It's definitely not for everybody, but it makes sense if you're an organization using it and you're sending a lot of documents to another organisation that you rely on heavily, but you're not going to want to do this for every email.
But also, Gmail reads all your email, so it can advertise to you better. So, underneath it all, you've got to think about that too.
I see if you've got a business account, it reads them less, but I don't know. Maybe you have to buy multiple tiers to do that.
Possibly, but how can you trust them to do that? I know a couple of universities in the UK switched over lock, stock and barrel to having their university emails hosted and all their services hosted on Gmail. And in a similar way to Microsoft, I'm sure there are assurances that, well, we'll read less of your stuff. But, they can't promise they'll not read all of your stuff. Yeah,
I could quite believe it.
Moving on, and this is a story we've sort of touched on already, is that Trump's tariffs are now in effect. They are 25% for automakers and steel. They are 35%, I think I want to say, to China from America, and sort of 10% for the UK, 25% for the EU. But we're already seeing the impact of that hit tech shares. And I don't know about you, I've only got a very small share portfolio. It's taken this massive dive over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I've got very little tech, but everything's dropping like a stone at the moment. It's a good time to buy, potentially.
Yeah, mine's only tech.
Don't take any financial advice from us off this podcast. We do not know what we're talking about.
All I'm saying is what I have got isn't worth as much as it was. And I think that's probably true of all Apple shareholders, Google shareholders, Nvidia and other tech companies. And the whole market is down anyway. But Apple are particularly going to be affected by stuff like this.
Yeah, so they're 7% down after trading, which is a big drop in a day when they've announced nothing. So they are just, reaping the ramifications of what's happening in the wider world.
Yeah, and this was before the tariffs actually went into effect. This was just the announcement of the tariffs. The tariffs are in effect now. So let's face it, the long-term effect of this is that for Americans, and probably the rest of the world, because a lot of the stuff is assembled in America or shipped to America before going elsewhere, not always, depends what you're buying, is that kind of technology is now going to be more expensive, and definitely for American users. Before this, we were seeing increased prices at Walmarts and Best Buys and things like that. I presume that a knock-on effect of that when these sort of 35% plus tariffs go into effect are that your laptop is going to be, $200-300 more expensive than it was.
Yeah, so the rich are going to get richer and the poor aren't going to be able to buy stuff. It's not good, is it?
Well, no, it's bad all round, really. But it is what it is, and all we can do is report on it. I think of all companies, Apple may be best placed to absorb a lot of this because they've got such high overheads on their computers. So if they cannot pass on the cost of importing the tariffs onto their customers, they'll probably try and do that.
I'd have thought. It'd be interesting to see how this is all going to play out and what does everybody do? Is some companies going to pass on, some going to absorb. It'll be interesting just to see what this is going to look like.
It is, and we're going to talk about the impact of this on a company we're familiar with when we get to the game section, but I just think it's interesting that we're already beginning to see this kind of thing. Moving on, and back to email briefly. I think we've recommended Thunderbird as a potential email client before. You installed Outlook, the basic Outlook, on one of your family's computers, I think, and then went back and installed Thunderbird, or did you?
I didn't go back and install Thunderbird, but I did debate it. Outlook free, whatever it's called, is quite good, apart from it shows you an advert. And my parents understand what Outlook is. But Thunderbird, what's got me is I think they've got about 20 million users a month, which is way more than I would have anticipated. But actually, I can see it as quite a good alternative to the big corporates.
Frankly, I think you should be installing it, but then I'm all in on open source stuff. So Thunderbird is a really good email client. I have used it previously. It's difficult corporately for me to use it because it's not supported for a couple of things within our organization. But if I was on Gmail or any other thing, I probably would be using Thunderbird. So Thunderbird is an open source email client. It's sort of a spin-off of the Mozilla Corporation with Firefox. They're going to offer a new tier called Thunderbird, which will be sort of a paid version of Thunderbird called Thundermail, which will have a whole email account and an ecosystem built into it as well, in the same way that Gmail has an ecosystem or Outlook has an ecosystem. Thunderbird was only a client. It didn't include mail accounts and stuff like that. So this is going to give you that for a small-ish monthly fee. And I think if it maintains the ability for them to produce a good open source email client, awesome. And for people that want that, it's quite a cool email address, isn't it, Thundermail? I think it's not a bad idea.
I think it's a good idea, and it would be great to have somebody else playing in the Microsoft Google space. So I think it's good. I wouldn't want to retry it actually at some point.
Email's really quite fundamental, isn't it? And people don't think about it. So much of it actually goes through Microsoft's and Google's hands. And it is a lot of data, and there is potentially sensitive stuff in there, and very few people encrypt it. But it's a very basic protocol that's been with us since the start of the dawn of the internet, really. So I'm glad that there's still clients and alternatives to, the big few that are out there managing email.
And their tagline for Thunderbird is "Free forever, donate to make it better." I think that's quite cool.
I think it's reasonable. Mozilla has had some challenges recently with the sort of privacy standpoints and all the rest of it, but stuff like this is good. They've mostly been good stewards of open source, and they can trace their lineage back to Netscape and the original web browsers and all the rest of it, and I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt in many cases.
Yep, no, I'd agree with
that. Moving on, and a consequence of, unfortunately, American policy again, is there is an open genetic repository of data. So if you have your genome profiled or any part of your genetics profiled, you get what's called a SNP. An SNP is the file type, which can be very large or very small depending on sort of the level of genetic data that you want to get down to. Obviously, it's quite expensive and complicated to do that and host it. A genome is large. If you're going to have a big one anyway, it consumes a lot of data. It's very complex. You need specialized ways to analyze them. But there was an open version of that called OpenSNP, where a bunch of these things, where people who'd been in 23andMe and volunteered to upload their genomes to it, you could download them and make use of it in order to sort of do some learning or test against other genomes that you'd been collecting as a researcher. So this is an amazing resource that they're shutting down because they're worried about their threat to privacy in the wake of the 23andMe implosion.
I don't know what to say on this one. It's just the way the world's going, isn't it? 23andMe is obviously they filed for bankruptcy, and this is obviously a knock-on effect. It's a shame, isn't it? Because what could we have learned from this? But obviously, with all the researchers in America not wanting to be there anymore, this going away, it's not good for future researchers in these things.
No, I mean, the point of research, the point of science is you do something reproducible. To be able to do reproducible things, you need lots of data to work with it and prove that the theory that you've developed on your data holds true on other data. That's part of what reproducible science is, what you do. So having a resource like this to test if we had genetic data on people with multiple sclerosis in my enterprise at work, this could potentially be a way to see if there was something we'd seen in our data inside of an open source data set. We could reproduce our work within that. And that's so important for science and for the world in general, because the discoveries that could be made from something like this, as you've hinted at, could be huge. And it's just a resource that the world is losing as a consequence of some fairly short-sighted, short-term economic work that's going on in the United States. And I just think it's a tragedy that these kinds of things are going away.
I would concur with that statement.
Something that's, I don't know, less of a tragedy, but probably not surprising in the way the world is going, is Apple has had criticism for excessive pop-ups that let users reject tracking. So this was a problem the French government thought with excessive tracking for Ask Not to Track, app tracking transparency inside of Apple, when they brought that in, and Facebook got very upset about it a couple of years ago. This feels a bit excessive, this fine, actually.
Yeah, it does feel a little excessive, but maybe Apple needs a few excessive fines to get them to toe the line rather than their continual pushing of the line. So
tell us about LLM providers on the cusp of extinction.
So Gartner, the company we all know and love, is saying that LLM providers are on the cusp of extinction, which is interesting because of all the costs of building products, and it's a very competitive market. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Because of all the spending going in, I think they're struggling. Companies are struggling to get into this, aren't they? It's such an expensive get in at the moment because the people already in that market are already doing it, and they're obviously consuming a huge amount of, I'm going to say electricity, but power to do this. You need such big models. And so it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. Obviously, we recently had that Chinese one that came out of nowhere. So there could be companies like that in the background that are doing it stealth and working their way in. But I wonder whether we can see more form of this AI tech in smaller data sets rather than try and do everything data set. I wonder if that's where we're going to end up.
Yeah, DeepSeek, wasn't it? Who tried to do it with smaller amounts of hardware. this is it. There's a lot of them. There's Claude, there's Anthropic, there's OpenAI, there's Google Gemini, there's all the other little ones we don't know about. If you go on Hugging Face, which is sort of the open source repository of where these things are from, there are so many models. Llama as well. So many models are there being run in data centers for a variety of things that it's not a surprise, really. I'll bring up Hugging Face as we're talking.
I've never heard of Hugging Face.
If you ever want to install local models on your machine, you go to Hugging Face. But as you look through these things, all of these are models that you can download, open source models, and run on your computer or in your data center for some of the bigger ones. So, the Quen model that's quantized to 7 billion items, for example, is this one.
Wow.
That probably won't run on your average computer. So the idea is you pick one that will run on your computer or on your particular graphics card or something like that. But the sheer amount of these is huge. Let me switch to models and I start scrolling here. There's 100 pages of models here. Pick one that'll work in your data center or on your computer or whatever it is, and you can understand why this is sort of a critical mass of large language models that you can download and run and try and improve on and write your own agents for. Microsoft just spent most of yesterday talking about at their Copilot event about what they were bringing to the next generation of Copilot, bringing in agents to do your shopping for you, do your research for you, do whatever for you. And that's mostly based on OpenAI models, but I can't think for Microsoft it's the only one. They've probably got 7 or 8 of these of their own up and running. Plus they're probably trying out DeepSeek. Plus they're probably trying out Llama. There's a huge market here, and you can understand why some of this can't continue. There's too much of it, consuming too much power and too much. It's in the headspace of too many people. Market leaders will continue to do so. I can't imagine OpenAI are going away anytime soon. But who's to say that there isn't somebody working on something in their kitchen that's far more efficient, fits into less memory, and works better, based on whatever training data set they've been able to do it. So it's a fascinating thing. It does remind me of the early days of computing when you had like Spectrums and Commodore 64s and, random thing over here and random computer company Y would pop up and announce something. We're going to talk about, some of that in the main show. It feels a bit like that. It feels a bit more Wild West to me at the moment.
It's definitely Wild West to a point, I think, but it feels like that's going to come to an end because the barrier to entry is so high, and companies, unless that have internal IT dev teams, probably aren't going to chase this because it's too much work to get up and running, and they might as well go somewhere like Hugging Face or use something off the shelf.
Yeah, interesting times anyway. This is in here particularly for you, Chris. So this was a story in 9 to 5 Mac this week about Steve Jobs' famous third device might not have much time left. And what he means by that is the iPad. He thinks the iPad might be going away. And the reason for that is once we've got iPhones that can fold out to the size of an iPad, why do you need an iPad?
I kind of agree with this. I think it'd be a shame. I love my iPad, but should I just get a MacBook instead? And just have a phone that becomes an iPad, and hopefully that's where the iPad will live on. But I wouldn't be surprised. I think our phones got so much bigger and more capable that a lot of people don't need an iPad. They do so much more on their phone. So it's sad for me, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
I'm all over this. At this point, it becomes actually a useful thing to me. Whereas I don't have the problem is an iPad feels like a computer to me, but then I'm always hit by the limitations of the iPad not being a computer, as we've talked about many, many times before. I don't have those same expectations of my phone. Possibly I should do, because let's face it, it's potentially running a chip more than capable of doing lots of Mac-like things. But a phone I can just make bigger when I actually want to get down and look at a spreadsheet, or I want to look at it, do a bit more research on something, and that's what I've got in my pocket. This feels much better to me.
I'm looking forward to this world. I also find that where I use my iPad all the time, I can do so much more on my phone when I'm just out with my phone. But you see it with people, their phones have become their primary computing devices. They don't need a tablet as well. So you can definitely see it. Is there a world where iPadOS goes away and it just goes back to iOS? Quite possibly. It never really differentiated, so you could see the world where it goes back in. So as sad as I would be, it does make sense.
I'm here for this. Let me unfold my phone into an iPad mini. That's pretty much all I need. If I want to read a magazine, I got a bigger screen to do it. When I want to just use my phone and surf it, then I think that's a great use of Apple's technology.
I would love a device like this.
There we go. We're agreed on something.
Ooh, and it's the death of the iPad, which is strange for me to agree with.
We'll see. I mean, I got to think that Tim Cook won't like this. He'll want to keep selling you standard iPads as they are forever.
They're better to cannibalise themselves, aren't they? And do you know what? Rather than selling me an iPad every 3-4 years, they could sell you a phone that can be an iPad every 2 years, and a lot more people like you. So there probably is a bigger market here, and Apple will do all right out of it, I'm sure.
How much do you think an M1 unfolding iPhone would cost with that screen, or M7 iPhone?
It's going to be a couple of grand, isn't it? You can see
the
it
Vision
now.
Pro is $3.5 grand.
You can see it now. And for me, it would be worth it because I won't have 2 devices. I'll buy 1 device. So I can see this future.
Yeah, my worry is what you just said there. It's every 2 years, though. I mean, if you buy a computer, we both just bought Mac Minis. I wouldn't anticipate replacing this Mac Mini for probably 5 years, frankly, because it's good enough for that. I mean, unless something amazing came along, I'd expect to get 5 years worth out of a desktop computer. My phone, I expect to get 2 years worth out of. But dropping, let's call it $3.5 grand on a phone every 2 years is quite a lot more.
It's a lot of money, isn't it? So I'm with you. I think phones every 2 years, Mac 4 years, iPad 3. That's what I should be doing in my head because the equipment's so good now. That's what I should be doing. Will I? I don't know. I've had my iPad 1 year. It's fantastic. I've had my Mac 6 months. Fantastic. My phone, 18 months. Still fantastic. I'm not even that bothered about upgrading my phone, to be honest. There's nothing on it that's frustrating me. I think Apple, the hardware has got so good. And it's not just Apple, is it? Android's in a similar place.
I think all computers are in a similar place. If you look at the production of laptops these days, everything, those latest Snapdragon machines that we were looking at, hardware is better, software is better, be it closed or open source. I think it's all mostly improving. The governance of it and governmental management of it is worse, and I think capitalism has made it worse. But the actual hardware that we run and what we're able to do with our machines in some scenarios is a lot easier than it used to be. I was going to tell an anecdote about I tried to help a PhD student this week with some Python on their computer. So this is a PhD student, very bright person, didn't have the understanding of what a DOS prompt was on their Windows computer. And I think that disconnect between what I can do she has a touchscreen laptop as well, touching the screen and moving things around and then actually having to type things on a keyboard to make commands happen. That disconnect is huge, and I think that's a real problem. We're talking about I don't blame the student at all. It's just learning, and they got on and they'd figured it out by the end of it, and that was good. But that initial disconnect about how I do things and the tactile, this is an icon that I've got to drag and it opens a dedicated app to do the thing I want to do. It's all done for me. I just manipulate it, as opposed to, no, you need to sequence the actions to make this happen. It's quite foreign for a couple of generations behind us. And it does worry me slightly. I know I've talked about it with my children before, that there is a disconnect between the way I see a computer and you see a computer and what they see as a computer because of smartphones. It'll be even worse for your children, I think. That there is definitely something that there's a quantum leap missing between what the iPad and the iPhone have done to people these days versus what we view for a computer.
Completely agree with you. It's become a lot more commoditized, hasn't it? A lot more easier to interact with, to do what would have been something quite complicated. Look at editing a video. You can, everybody can film now and cut it up and put something up on Instagram. I've seen my wife do it in like 5 minutes. I wouldn't have a clue how to do it, but that's just because we've been educated in a different way.
Yeah, but it's to always do the same task, and I think that sort of streamlining of well understood tasks is one thing, but when it becomes difficult, people just don't think it can be done. And I want us to get back a little bit to do that. The problem solving of how do I fix this problem with a computer is something you and I both faced as computer science students, but actually people could face every day. People jump through hoops, with iPads being a perfect example of this, to get something that would take you 30 seconds to do on a computer done with 400 shortcuts. So there's a tension here between these things. Anyway, we've probably gone off topic slightly. We were talking about cool unfolding phones.
I think the world wants a folding iPhone, don't they? That's what the world needs, and Apple needs to work out how they're going to run the OS on it and hopefully cannibalise the iPad and own cannibalising the iPad.
Yeah. Tell us about the 18.5 betas.
18.5 betas are out, and there is nothing in them. I put this in here because when we first started the show, it's what we started talking around was what's coming out of the betas, what's the future look like, and basically not a lot is what we're going to say. So sadly, there's not a lot in 18.5. There's nothing in 18.4 really, and it feels like Apple's done with the 18 iteration, and obviously all eyes on June for the 19 iteration.
I feel like Apple is washing their hands of 18 because it's been a bit of a disaster.
It feels like iOS 13 all over again.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a nothing, hasn't it? We've been promised features, new Siri, Apple Intelligence, all manner of bits and things, and yeah, to be fair, they've delivered most of what they said that wasn't Apple Intelligence related, but what that delivery is wasn't very much. So let's hope things are better in 19.
Agreed.
Shall we do some media?
Yeah, it's all on you, I think, this week.
Yeah, I suppose it is a bit. So first things first, I installed iOS 15.4. I launched my Sonos to listen to some nice music the other day, and my Sonos player, which was up to date, refused to play anything. It said a firewall is blocking my access to your Sonos system. So just from going to 15.3 to 15.4, they changed something in the operating system, and it wasn't immediately clear to me what had done. I've never been asked to change a firewall setting on my Mac before. Have you?
No, I don't believe I have.
Things go into system settings and security preferences to share your screen and to allow access to apps and all that kind of stuff. This is the first time I'd been asked to do something network related, and I sort of clicked around a little bit looking to see if there was something in the Sonos interface, and eventually, hidden away somewhere, there was a pop-up saying Sonos needs access to your network services, and I clicked allow, and all my services came in. But what a terrible interface. Good job, Apple, for blocking something that just worked for years.
Yeah, it does feel like Apple have made some changes, but you didn't know it was coming, which is a bit frustrating.
But imagine you had like a headless Mac running somewhere with all these pop-ups sitting in the background that you use as a network server. What the hell do you do?
Stuff just stops working, and you wouldn't know about it.
Not good enough. Not good enough at all. And that is a real problem. Lots of people bought Mac Minis to stick in a cupboard somewhere so they could run network-type operations. And I think, thankfully, I've got this attached to a screen because I use it for my podcast. But, I don't like this kind of, changes without notification. Really.
I completely agree with you on this one. You need to tell me this is coming, Apple.
Anyway, that was a rant, and I'll move on to something that makes me happy because I like us to find things to talk about as well. One of the best films of two of the best films of the last 10 years have been the Spider-Verse films. Animated films from Sony involving Miles Morales' incarnation of Spider-Man. The last two were fantastic. They won Oscars for animation. The third one is now due. Beyond the Spider-Verse in 2027. I can't believe it's so far away, but I'm not surprised the amount of animation that people need to do in order to do that. Have you seen the Spider-Verse films?
I knew, that's why I was putting a face. I knew this was coming. I've seen the first one. I knew there'd be a sigh. I'm sorry. I apologise. I'm a bad person.
You didn't like it?
I quite enjoyed the first one. I must confess, I am not a big fan of all the verses, all the multiverse stuff. I've watched the Spider-Man films with my kids, and my brain doesn't get its head around it.
You can't even appreciate the animation?
I do like the animation. I think it's a really good style. I like that they've done something that isn't Disney or Pixar. I like that they've just done their own style, and I think that actually is really good and a massive selling point for it. So I like the style. I thought it was very funny. For whatever reason, I just haven't watched the second one.
I'm gasping in horror for a little
I think
bit.
I have the second one. I probably bought it at some point.
It's worth go back and watch the first one again, and then watch the second one.
Like I'm doing with Severance.
Just to get the plot lines. But if nothing else, you can appreciate the animation styles. Which you go, oh, that's an interesting style, but it's so much more than that. That when you see it more in the second film, but even in the first film, the different universes in it are actually all animated differently as well, with different frame rates and different styles. So the one that is closest to sort of old-fashioned pulp comic books actually has dots if you look at the screen, like those comics that were printed in sort of the 80s and 90s, and run at different frame rates. Miles' character runs at a different frame rate to the other characters, even when they're on screen at the same time.
That's quite cool.
It is the most amazing technical achievement. It really is. I love the films to bits. I mean, they're good stories, amazing voice cast, beautifully animated, but the thought that has gone into them is just incredible.
Okay. All right, another one on the list. Let me finish Severance, and then I'll try and fit that into.
And I'm just going to leave the ratings from Rotten Tomatoes for the second film up there for you to see them and just bask in the glory.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
So I can't wait for the next Spider-Verse film. I've loved the previous two. I think they're the best Spider-Man's films ever made, and that's saying something because there've been some really quite high bars in that universe. Even going back to the Tobey Maguire films, I think we've had good Spider-Man content, but these are terrific.
Yeah, I did like the Tobey Maguire film. Well, I love the first one. I haven't seen them in a long time either.
Yeah, there you go. You need a Spider-Man rewatch.
Could be. My children might quite enjoy that.
I think so. And that's not cool these days because superheroes are now out of fashion. But I think Spider-Man deserves his place.
About time I watched it then if it's out of fashion.
I would absolutely say so. I talked about this last week, Paradise on Disney+. I have one episode to go. It's only an 8-episode run. They're about 45 minutes each. Really solid, well-done television with a premise that isn't massively surprising when you sort of get to the end of the first episode, but it's just so competently put together with some great acting. The 7th episode, where they explain the day that brought them to all this, he said trying to dance and not give away spoilers. It was a fantastic hour of television. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And just if you fancy something a bit different, I think it's worth a look.
It's always good when they land it well, isn't it? And they bring the story all together. It's always nice when you can appreciate that.
Yeah, it's good. And there's nothing... I don't think there's anything particularly new in it. You've seen stuff like this before in other TV and films. It's just very, very competently put together, like I say. So I'd check it out. If you've got, you're 45 minutes, you're looking for something to watch, make sure you make it to the end of the first episode. But I think there's enough mystery there to pull you through, and then it's just extremely well executed from that point on. So yeah, Paradise, check it out.
And it's free on Disney+.
Well, if you subscribe to Disney+, it's free.
Which I do at the minute, so I might have to partake.
Last week, you said you'd watched The Studio. I think you said you made it through the first episode but didn't particularly enjoy the experience. I went and I had a go. Is that a fair summary?
No, you've absolutely nailed it. You're now going to tell me how wrong I am. That's what I was waiting for.
I don't know that I am. So I've watched 2 episodes of The Studio, and I will watch the 3rd one. And it's one of those things, I see it for what it is, which is it's a very clever, well-done thing. It's beautifully filmed. It's well acted. The scripting is very tight. I appreciate the humour while not laughing very much at it. So I like everything about it, but it leaves me a bit empty, I think, is my sort of reaction to it.
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed because I wanted it to be good. I quite like Seth Rogen. I really loved him in Dumb Money. I just didn't appreciate all the long camera shots, and I just wasn't enjoying it. I thought there's better TV I could be watching, and that's why I didn't continue with it.
So I didn't notice this so much in the first episode, but the second episode is a one-take thing. And so like 1917, the film is allegedly a one-take. This is a true one-take from beginning to end. That is actually a one-take about filming a one-take. So it's very meta, and it's very, very well done. And it is extremely well done. Everybody involved in that should thoroughly give themselves a pat on the back because it's just beautifully done. And the ability to do that kind of stuff is really impressive. I did hear a thing this week about how it's slightly less impressive than it used to be because once upon a time, now these days you can take things out with digital effects. You still got to do the one take thing, but if there's a boom mic there that's not meant to be, or there's a camera, a lead for a camera gets in the shot, that's something that you would have just had to deal with once upon a time in the past. Whereas now you can map that out after the fact. It's incredibly well done, and again, it's like a piece of artwork. I can look at art and think, yes, that's art. But I'm too much of a Philistine to actually feel the deeper feelings about it, and I feel like that about this. It's a work of art that leaves me a bit cold, but I think it's worth a look, particularly that second episode, because it's so well done.
I think that's fair. I don't know, it just didn't click for me, sadly. And I was the same with the show with Harrison Ford in it that they've got on Apple TV, Shrinking. And I just didn't do anything for me either. I don't know why.
And that's so weird, because that's all the people involved with Ted Lasso. You should be all over that.
Agreed. It should push all the right buttons, but for some reason it didn't. Maybe I need to try it again.
I didn't like it either. And again, I appreciated it, but thought, I'm not laughing, therefore I've got better things to be doing all the time. Games?
Yeah, I've watched no media really this week. I've nearly finished Severance, so when I have, I will report on season 1, and then we can talk hopefully about season 2 at some point.
Fair enough. Let's just blast through some games. Actually, I'm going to talk on the first line, and then I'm probably just going to shut up and let you talk about the rest of it, because it's right up your alley, this one. So, we talked last week about Sony had released GT Sophie in a patch of Gran Turismo. I had a go against it. I beat it handily in my Ioniq 5N car around Brands Hatch, so I felt quite good about myself, but then I realised I was on the easiest version of the AI. Although they were all in the same car, so I think I was just driving better than them. But yeah, it's quite clever. I quite like the little faces over the car to tell you how they feel about you. Yeah,
I think it's quite cool, and you should try again on the next level up and then the next level up, because they do step the AI quite well when I've played it in the past. It is well done.
Fair enough. Do you want to tell us about the Nintendo Switch?
So I nearly forgot about the Nintendo Switch 2, but I was in the office this week and I was talking to my colleagues and they're like, oh, the Switch video's out today. So we all sat around and watched like a 5-minute video all about the Switch, just about the hardware. And it's great, to be fair to Nintendo, that they can convey the hardware in a 5-minute run-through video, like a real bite-sized video. And after 5 minutes, you know exactly everything you need to know about it. So the Nintendo Switch 2 is out for pre-order next week in some countries and due for delivery on the 5th of June. So not very long to wait. They seem to be doing, I'm quite impressed with Nintendo. You know, they came out early in the year and went, Switch 2's coming. Then they've come out again. Here's a bit more on the Switch 2. You know, they're spoon feeding me the right amount. I think they're doing a really good job. So Switch 2 looks just like the Switch 1 in essence, but much bigger screen, same thickness, bigger Joy-Cons. So that looks great to me. It's not OLED, so whether we're going to get an OLED version in the future. It's got a 1080p screen up from 720. Big thing is when you dock it, you can have 4K display on your nice big telly. Fantastic. All the controllers look very similar. If you've used a Switch, you get a very similar controller. As you're demonstrating, you can now buy a camera to add on to it. I'm glad that's an add-on and not built in, because that would only drive up the cost of the console and probably not something I would want. But I think it looks great. The build quality of the hardware looks really good. The Joy-Cons are magnetic and snap in. It's going to be interesting to see how that works. But on the whole, it looks great. I'm a little disappointed there's not as much colour on it. What I liked about the Switch 1 was you could buy it with the bright controllers. I thought that looked cool. MKBHD has done a video, which we're just loading now, and we've got a link in the show notes for. He does a great review. He's so lucky. He's probably had like 4 or 5 hours with this thing, played a few of the games. But the hardware on the whole looks great. It's coming with more storage, so it looks like the games are going to be bigger. There is a bit of controversy that the games are going to cost circa £70, give or take, but I'm not that surprised. I mean, that's what you're paying for PlayStation games. To be fair to Nintendo, they do quite good sales from time to time if you're patient. I think it's looking really good. The interface looks very similar to the Switch, so people will be able to pick up and run with it. I think they've taken what they already had and they've just carried on the formula. It seems like they've addressed all the minor issues, and it looks like they're going to have a major hit on their hand. It's a little more expensive, so it's going to come in at $450 rather than the $300 that the original Switch came in at. I tell a lie, it's coming in at $395, but that's without a game. You're going to buy it with Mario Kart, so you can spend the $430. But let's talk Mario Kart World. So the game everybody wants is Mario Kart World. We've not had a new Mario Kart since the Wii U, and that one got repurposed for the Switch, and that's Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And so we're going to get Mario Kart World, which looks amazing. You can have up to 24 cars on it. It's been optimized for the Switch 2. It just looks awesome, and I can't wait to play it with my kids. So I really want one. I want to be able to pre-order one next week. But to pre-order one, I think you need to have a Nintendo account. You need to sign up for their emails. You need to have played on your Switch. But they don't really tell you, I don't know when you meant to have played on your Switch. So it's going to be interesting to see that. So you've got to have spent a certain amount of time playing on it. But I would love to pre-order one of these next week if I can.
So you must have been a Nintendo Switch Online member for at least 2 years continuously by the 31st of the 3rd, 2025, with an active membership on the day of pre-order. That's not me. Yeah, I think this is interesting. I mean, fair enough, they've jacked the price up a little bit. It's a slightly better console. It's got 120 hertz screens, so you can appreciate the frame rate of things a little bit better. It's a little bit bigger than it was before. I quite like the magnetic ability of the Joy-Cons to be able to snap in. I think they've improved the Joy-Cons as well. They used to be drift with the original the controllers that came with the Switch, so that's an improvement. I guess deal with the price first. Yeah, it's a little bit more expensive. It'll come down in price. They'll presumably do like a Switch 2 OLED at some point. They'll do the other version of the Switch 2 with the sort of static controllers, not the magnetic ones as the Switch Lite. Is that what it's called?
Yes, Switch Lite is the one with the fixed controllers. But equally, though, the original Switch came out 8 years ago. You know, the world has moved on.
It has, and I think the handheld market has moved on as well. And let's face it, this thing's biggest competitor is probably the Steam Deck.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And for a certain person, a Steam Deck is always going to be better. You can get a Steam Deck with an OLED screen, but if you think of what Valve put on sale compared to what Nintendo put on sale, that's going to be all of them. They can bring their library with them and they get on with it. Now, what Valve don't have unless you get into the salty seas and you turn your Steam Deck into a Switch, which could be done, is they don't have Nintendo games. So what you buy a Nintendo console for is for Mario Kart and Donkey Kong and Zelda and those first platform exclusives that come with it. And I'm glad to see that with this hardware announcement came a fairly chunky software announcement. There is going to be a new Mario Kart. You are going to be able to play your Switch games on there. There is going to be new content for this thing going forward. And that's a power to Nintendo, is that they've got the hardware and software thing right in the same way that Apple do, for the games at least. I still think the underlying network features of a lot of Nintendo stuff are lacking, although this time there is a webcam. You are able to have online chat with people you're playing with. There are a few features that should probably have been in the Switch, but it didn't have the power to do it. So I think all that's quite positive, I think.
Yeah, I think on the whole positive. And what you're teasing as well is you're also going to get a GameCube emulator coming, which is pretty cool. And you can buy a controller there for about £60. So it'd be great to get GameCube games. I think, to be fair to Nintendo, they've done a great job of bringing their back catalogue. If you sign up for the £20 a year online service, which is a great price, you can get all these emulators for free, in essence, rolled into that. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think they've nailed it. I think they've taken a great product, they've iterated on it. It is an iteration, and I think it's going to be really good. I definitely want one, and I'd love to play Mario Kart with my kids on it. That would be an instant win for us.
I think it's less risk-taking than some previous Nintendo consoles. I think the Wii was a big risk. I think the GameCube was probably a big risk back in its day. The Wii U wasn't, and it failed horribly.
The Wii U was a bit risky. They didn't have any games for it. You had this massive tablet thing and a console, and it just didn't work, did it? For whatever reason, it didn't work. After the massive success of the Wii, they then nailed it with the Switch, and they've taken a long time to bring this Switch 2 out for what is a very iterative update, but I don't know. I think it looks good, and maybe the Switch 1 went on too long, but the Switch 2 is coming, and I think it looks like they've got it right to me.
Yeah, there's some good stuff. I mean, my biggest reservation about this really is the price. I think the console is a little on the pricey side for what's mostly a child's console or a younger person's console. And let's face it, I've seen people traveling with Switches. I've seen kids with Switches and all the rest of it. It's quite a lot. And if you've got to buy Mario Kart 3 or 4 times for your family, that's really quite a lot. If it's 80 quid a cartridge. So there's a few things that do give me pause, but Nintendo has always been expensive, and inflation is what it is.
Yeah, and as a parent, I think you might think twice about giving one of these to your kids that they're going to hold, they're going to chuck it around. You know what I mean? It's a lot of money for a child not to look after, because children generally don't look after things. The other thing just to note, though, and we should have covered it last week, that's my mistake, was Nintendo are having a way that you can loan people a cartridge, a virtual cartridge. So if you buy a game, so I've bought a lot of games, I can't loan them to my children's accounts, I'd have to go and buy them again. But they're coming up with a mechanism where you can virtually loan a cartridge to your family for 2 weeks, and then it will automatically come back to you and you can extend the loan. So I quite like that I could loan my games to my children. That's coming to the Switch 1 as well. So because I do buy all the games digitally because I didn't want my children losing the cards. But I quite like the idea that they could play a game and I could loan it to them. I can't play it while they're playing it, but I can loan it to them and do it all legally. I think that's really smart that they've done that.
Yeah, the other thing that's smart is they've updated the amount of storage that's inside the console. So I think the original one had 32 gigs, and now it's up to 256, I think. So unsurprisingly, 8 years later, you get more storage. But this also means you may be able to get chunkier games like Call of Duty and things like that on your Switch.
And you can put a micro SD express card in there for additional storage, which is great. Nintendo's always offered that you can just put a card in and have more storage. Yeah,
they're slightly different format though, aren't they? The SD Express ones, are they? That's not a standard SD? I can't remember. Maybe it is a standard SD. It's got to be of a particular standard that writes to the disk fast enough to use it anyway. So it's all good. I did think you're going to get 1080p playing on the console at 120 frames per second. As you said, you get 4K if you dock it. There's a fan in the dock. Did you know that?
I'm not surprised. It sounds like it's going to be something I want to bury behind my telly.
Yeah. Fair enough. The fact that you'll be able to get 4K at a Nintendo first-party console is good anyway. I'm excited. I want to see what the situation's going to be like for those of us that can't pre-order them.
I want to know if I can. Am I going to be able to pre-order it? I think I tick the boxes, but have I played enough hours? It doesn't really say what I need to be doing. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yep. And then just to finish this story off, as Chris has alluded to already, that Switch 2 pre-orders are at threat because of this Trump tariff problem. So it's not just Apple that are going to be facing this. A Japanese company like Nintendo is also going to be facing potential, what did we say, 25% at least tariffs to import things into the United States?
Which is huge, which is a huge cost on an already expensive device. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
It absolutely is. 2 quick stories just to finish off on. First one is also Nintendo related. We have talked about the Delta emulator a couple of times. It's a really well done emulator for your iPhone. I keep meaning to look to see if you can get an Apple TV, actually. I don't know if you can get Delta on Apple TV, but that would be a really cool use of your Apple TV with a paired PlayStation 3 controller.
It would be cool, but would the graphics look good stretched on a 65-inch telly?
Well, how high is the resolution of an iPhone compared to a NES?
Yeah, that's a fair point, actually.
Riley and the people at Delta do a pretty good job of making these look good. Anyway, somehow they've managed to reverse engineer online multiplayer for Nintendo DS games, which is just incredible.
Yeah, the fact they brought this out. So yeah, you can now do multiplayer DS games on an emulator, which doesn't cost a lot of money. It's fantastic, isn't it? What a feat of engineering.
Yeah, absolutely tremendous. There was no such thing as online Nintendo NES games, for those of you who remember.
I still don't play online games now.
That is true. I should have said, I meant to put it in games, is that there's been a return in Call of Duty Land to the map Verdansk, which is the map that you and I played way back in the day when I actually managed to convince you to play Call of Duty for a brief period of time. So that's dropped 2 days ago for Call of Duty, and we've all been living in nostalgia of lockdown. It's fantastic. So I should try and get you to play that again just for a bit of old time's sake. Although you only played 2 games.
Is that all I've ever played?
Yep. Not bitter about it at all. One very quickly to finish on. This was via a toot from David Amador. Games that are turning 30 in 2025, and as I look down this list, there's a couple you and I have certainly played. It's interesting as we've been talking about Nintendo things, Donkey Kong Country 2, Destruction Derby, Super Mario's Yoshi Land, all turning 30, Warcraft 2, turning 30,
Love that game.
Command & Conquer, turning 30, Worms, turning 30. God, I'm old.
Call out to Full Throttle as well. I'm not a big point and click person, but actually Full Throttle I did play. So you were a biker, and it was a point and click adventure game from LucasArts, I guess. Fantastic. But Command & Conquer, Warcraft 2, I played those 2 games to death. And Worms at the time was awesome because you could have your mates around and you'd shoot each other, and it was just a game unlike any other game that you'd played. So that was cool. And you didn't mention Wipeout though. Wipeout, what a game! That's
because I was going to finish on Wipeout. Wipeout, one of the 2 games that made me buy a PlayStation. Gran Turismo and Wipeout. And I've said it before, Wipeout is the game that made gaming cool.
Wipeout was cool. Is that never coming back? I don't really know what's happened to that.
There was an HD remix you can still buy for your PlayStation 5, I think, that came out on PlayStation 4 that contained, an upscaled version of all the tracks and updated music and all the rest of it. But Sony disbanded the studio that was Psygnosis Games from back in the day. Sony disbanded
This is why I get annoyed when studios get bought, because no good ever comes of that.
That is very true. Should we do a quick-ish main show? So, main show, it's probably worth us having a think about Microsoft. Microsoft turned 50 yesterday, and that's quite incredible, really. A company that has had a massive impact on the computer market, I think it's fair to say. Microsoft is the same age as me.
Microsoft is the same age as you. They're 20 years older than most of my core games that we've just discussed that were really impactful on my childhood. It's amazing they're 50. It feels like they've been around forever, but only 50 years. I'm actually reading Bill Gates' autobiography at the moment called Source Code, and it's quite interesting listening to his very humble beginnings in life before he was about to become one of the richest men with one of the most well-known companies in the world. Just how he started out in life is super interesting. But yeah, Microsoft 50, who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, quite incredible, really. And I think it's probably just us worth going through a couple of sort of the high points of Windows for us, because I don't think I'd be as into computers as I am without Microsoft. I'll give them their due. And just because I think it's important to do it. You talked about Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates there. It's, when you think of Microsoft, this image of Steve Ballmer shouting developers and going across the stage is always what comes into my head. He loved that company, didn't he? Look how much he sweated for that company.
He did love that company. It's not a great look, though, is it?
But he was on the stage yesterday. So Bill, Steve Ballmer and Satya Nadella were all on the stage yesterday. Bill Gates, Ballmer, and Paul, I can't remember the third founding member of Microsoft,
Paul Allen, I think it is.
Paul Allen, who started the company basically by coding BASIC Good use of words there. But Bill Gates coded BASIC and managed to get that released, his version of BASIC, and then through a variety of means, some, not all of them above board, developed a version of DOS. I think they copied, or allegedly copied, another developer's CPM to bring a disk operating system to the IBM PC. That launched with it. All IBM PCs came with Microsoft DOS. I can't remember what version it was, but very quickly they sort of iterated on that until the very first computer I bought myself, which was, and I had to really struggle to find links for this because a lot of these companies don't exist anymore. I bought an Opus 386-33, and I want to say about 1988. Does that feel about right for a 386?
No, I would say you're too late. In 95, we were all playing on 486s for Command & Conquer.
1988?
You said 88. 88, yes, that sounds good. Sorry, apologies. I thought you said 98.
Yeah, well, whatever I did, the podcast will show me right. 1988, I think I bought a 386-33. So I found this advert from Personal Computer World in 1987 talking about Opus Technology PC2. I didn't buy a PC2, but it certainly looked a bit like that. It had a 5.25 inch disc, it had a 3.5 inch disc, had a big monolithic keyboard. It came with a 40 megabyte hard disk, I want to say, and not a lot of RAM. I don't even remember how much RAM it would have come with. Something like 4 megabytes or something, I'm sure.
Possibly less. I think mine had 4 megabytes, and I probably came to it in 94.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? Every time I say megabyte, I need to try and catch myself. I'm not saying gigabyte. It's times changed quite quickly.
Yeah, 100%. But you are right in your statement of, if it wasn't for Microsoft, I wouldn't be into computers, because I had a beige computer like you, and that's what got me going. And I broke it a lot of the operating system and DOS, and then I had to learn how to fix it, and that's what got me in to understanding the basics of how computers worked. And then networking came, and file management and storage and upgrades and taking them to bits and building them. And if it wasn't for all of that, I wouldn't be here now. I do quite like buying my Mac now and not doing much with it, but I wouldn't mind to be able to take it to bits and upgrade it from time to time.
I remember spending, what felt like hours messing about in DOS trying to get autoexec.bats to be configured in a particular way, to configure memory, extended memory and expanded memory and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
you used to have to tweak all the settings so you could get what you needed to run your game. It was always a bit like playing whack-a-mole, wasn't it? That to load up your game you've just bought on floppy disks, you would need to configure the DOS so that you had enough right RAM and the IRQs, I think, and various other bits, just so it would all work. Crumbs, yeah, and Rod's showing you an example of that now on the YouTube channel.
It is crazy, and it was all DOS prompt and commands for, you've got a sound card in you, so set blaster to be this particular IRQ and load this into high memory and all the rest of it. And it was quite arcane, really, wasn't it?
But it gave us a great foundation, though, didn't it? It got us into, for me, it got me into computing at GCSE, then A-level, then university with you.
Yep, you're not wrong. And exactly the same, that I always had in the back of my head that this is what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to do stuff with computers. And I went off on an odd path to begin with, but I came back around to the right way. And, both of us are still highly dependent on them today and have a whole podcast based on it.
I'm in IT at my work, so it's all I know how to do.
Yeah, and my job would be impossible considering I do health data science without having the machines to manipulate the data on.
But it did give us the foundation, I think, tweaking, playing, probably knowing more about computers than our parents did at the time, whereas our children don't have that, do they, where they know more about it than we do. It was quite an interesting place where, the child knew more than the adult. It was quite interesting.
I listened to John Syracuse the other day saying about how he was the kid who could program the VCR, as they say, that you could work the clock on it, and it was the same in our household. My parents were just a little bit too old to really care about the technology that was coming in. I remember them buying me a Commodore 64. I remember, buying this myself, and my father just being completely mystified about what I was doing with these devices. And it was probably exactly the same.
Yeah, 100%. It was always my job to do those kinds of things. But that's how I learned everything. You played with it, you broke it, you fixed it. It was quite an education.
And both of us went from buying computers, I think, that Opus thing that I showed a minute ago, to very quickly, I iterated through a couple of things, to building computers. That's just what you did. I bought a motherboard, I bought a processor, I bought RAM and hard disks, I bought a case to put it in, I put it all in there, and then I loaded whatever the version of Windows was of the day, and I got working.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I only bought one computer, and then the next one was a Frankenstein where we bought the components, put them all together, went through all the pain of getting up and running, and then you would reuse your monitor and your keyboard and your mouse, and you'd swap those at some point, or you'd buy a better DVD drive or a CD writer and all those sorts of things.
It's interesting to think about, though, because I think a lot of Americans came to Mac because it was the first thing that was there. The podcasts we listened to, again, John Syracuse, John Gruber are examples of this. They went to school, they went to college, and what was in the schools and colleges was Macs, because that's just what was there, and the school system there could afford them or whatever. When I went to school, it was BBC Micros, which that's because there was a program between the BBC and a British computer company to produce those. That's what was there, and there was no immediate to Apple step. It was Windows DOS and then Windows all the way for me once I got my own sort of feet. And it wasn't until I actually came across Macs that I realized actually how much was being copied across from that world. That I think I had the typical PC user view that people who used Macs were a bit simple. They could only cope with one mouse button. The whole sheeple thing, as they'd call it these days. You just buy the next thing that the company is good enough to give you. Was definitely a thing. You don't understand what's going on with your computer. Whereas us as Windows users and people who built computers, we felt we had a deeper understanding of the operating system and all the things that went into it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Macs over here is just a lot less prevalent in educational institutions. For me, you'd see one occasionally in the design studio at college or in the music room, but they weren't really everywhere. They weren't in the computing rooms where you just had banks and banks of PCs. And so, it was all Windows up until university, which is when you converted me.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that. Look where it led to.
We're still talking today, so it can't be that bad.
Can't be that bad. I mean, I don't want to go on at length at this. I think it's quite nice to have a little bit of a positive thought. We've always got negative stories about Microsoft, and there's more and more of them all the time. But I wouldn't be where I am without Microsoft, I don't think. It's probably fair to say.
No, I think it's fair. And only last week, I think I said, you look at some of the icons on Windows 11 these days, and they look better than the Mac ones. And I quite like where Windows 11 has gone. I think they've done a pretty good job with it. And I use it occasionally for gaming, but I'm nowhere near an expert user anymore. I think I'm very novice in Windows land.
I'm quite happy to remain novice in Windows land. I think I was a system administrator. I did run Windows PCs corporately for quite a while in my NHS job. I know enough about them. I can still get by. It hasn't changed that much. They're a company trapped, as far as I'm concerned, Microsoft, where they're quite progressive in some ways, but absolutely not in others. It's still the case that if you dig not very deep into Windows, you will get old control panels up rather than modern system stylings. Their determination to focus on software from 40 years ago at this point, the ability to run it, I genuinely think holds them back. Whereas Apple and Linux can go, no, this far and no further. If you want it, you've got to rebuild it. I think works well for those operating systems, and they feel more progressive as a consequence. Microsoft's attention of mostly being a cloudy company with how do we upsell you on this, doesn't hurt them because they have the market share and market dominance that they have. But I don't think it benefits them, really. They're never seen as a particularly innovative company. They're just... Redmond, start your photocopiers is very true, I think. Yeah,
to a point. I guess they're so big, aren't they? They're not just Windows, they're Office, they're all the AI piece, they're all the server stuff. They are doing great stuff in the Azure stack. I guess Windows is not that, like you say, revolutionary or innovative, but it is a good OS, and it's very solid these days.
Yeah, but also advertising that's in there and trying to upsell you Office 365 and sell you OneDrive and Apple aren't exempt from this either. You get the same sort of operating system advertising within there as well, which is, again, I think wistfully I'm being pushed away from Windows in the same way that I went to Mac. I don't like the direction that they're taking, and there's a bunch of stories this week that I did put in because I was trying to be positive about Microsoft. I'm going to leave it on the thought that I think in many ways, for individuals like you and I, there have been a force for, if not good, then certainly a force for change. That the early days of the computer revolution, they did something. I think they're very, very clever businessmen. And if I say nothing else about Bill Gates and Ballmer and the people that started it, and Satya Nadella is an excellent engineer, I think I see where they were going. They've maximized the value for their shareholders up to the nth degree, and they continue to push along with good enough. I wouldn't say it's great. I'd say it's good enough. And where it's not good enough, they go and they buy a company, and or they'll invest in some tech from OpenAI or something to sort of stay on the cusp of that wave. I genuinely don't think they're a particularly innovative company, though.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They are a business, though, aren't they? And they're doing a very good job of it. They're healthier today than what they were 50 years ago.
Yep, it's a bigger market out there, isn't it? So, well done, Microsoft. I wouldn't be where I am without you, but at this point, our paths diverge.
And Bill obviously got laughed at when he said there'd be a computer in every household. Now there's a computer in everybody's hand, plus another one on the desk, plus a tablet, plus a watch. He 100% got that piece right.
Yeah, there's a computer in your greetings card that's probably more powerful than some of the stuff you wrote BASIC on back in the day.
And he was an engineer that became the CEO, wasn't he?
And a Harvard dropout.
Yeah, that's true. He never went back.
Yep, never went back. App of the week.
App of the week. Let's do it.
App of the week this week is called Sonophone. It is a little replacement for the Sonos app on your iPhone or your iPad. It's very fast. It works every time. It doesn't have any of the cruft that the current Sonos app does in it. Although, to be fair, the current Sonos app, it's getting better, but it still takes a good 25 seconds to get to the point where I can hit play and have music come out of my Sonos speakers. So this was about $3.99 on the App Store. It's by a German developer. If you're struggling a little bit with the current iteration of the Sonos app, check out Sonophone.
That's quite cool, and fair play to them for getting an app out there in the current climate.
Yeah. Thing of
the week. I've gone for a scoreboard this week. So I play a lot of ping pong with my son, and we had a paper scoreboard thing, and I've just bought this one. And it's quite cool. It's just got some buttons on the top. It charges by USB-C, which is obviously something I always go for. But it's great, and it's just quite a cool thing. It was 30 odd quid, but we use it all the time. There you go.
Cool. Why do Amazon do this? Why do they put this little apply 6% voucher thing halfway down?
And you have to tick it to get 6% off. I have no idea.
Why not just tick the button for us, Amazon?
I don't know. I assume there's a reason for it. But anyway, I would recommend it. It's quite cool.
There you go. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
It's a show. So if anyone wants to get in contact, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot, or he's on Blue Sky at g5maniac.bsky.social. I'm on Mastodon at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube by going to the website and click on the YouTube link, or drop us an email at waitfromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.